It speaks through subtle feelings rather than loud announcements. It speaks through recurring thoughts that refuse to disappear. It speaks through moments of silence when you suddenly realize that your old ambitions no longer carry the same weight. It speaks through an unexpected longing for a life you cannot yet describe. Do not underestimate these quiet signals. The modern world teaches you to trust only what can be measured. But your greatest transformations begin in places no instrument can detect. They begin in perception. They begin in awareness. They begin in a feeling that cannot yet be defended with facts. That is why so many people ignore the very beginning of their own awakening. They wait for the external world to give them permission to believe what the inner world has already revealed. Have you noticed how certain thoughts keep returning no matter how often you try to dismiss them? There comes a moment in every person's life that cannot be explained with logic alone. It arrives quietly without permission, without ceremony, and without any obvious change in the outer world. Yet something inside you begins to whisper that life is no longer moving in the same direction. You wake up feeling different. Even if everything around you appears exactly as it did yesterday, you cannot point to a single event that caused it. There is no dramatic announcement, no visible proof, and no clear destination. Still, you know something is changing. And what fascinates me is that this knowing often appears long before the mind can understand it. Most people make the mistake of dismissing this feeling because they cannot explain it. They tell themselves they are imagining things. They wait for evidence before trusting what they already sense. But the deepest movements of the human psyche never begin with evidence. They begin with awareness. Before your eyes recognize a new path, another part of your mind has already noticed it. Before your conscious thoughts can give language to what is happening, something deeper has already begun preparing you for a different life. This is why you may have felt strangely restless lately. Not because something is wrong with you, but because the person you have been is no longer large enough to contain the person you are becoming. The discomfort is not always a warning. Sometimes it is an invitation. Sometimes the soul becomes uncomfortable precisely because it refuses to remain where it has already learned everything it came to learn. Notice how your attention has begun to change. Conversations that once entertained you now leave you empty. Goals that once seemed important no longer create excitement. Places that once felt familiar suddenly feel distant, as though you are visiting a version of yourself that has quietly faded. Many people mistake this for confusion, but it is often the earliest sign of inner transformation. You are not losing yourself. You are slowly releasing an identity that has completed its purpose. The conscious mind always wants certainty. It asks, "Where am I going? What exactly is changing? When will I see results?" But life rarely answers those questions immediately. Instead, it teaches through experience. It asks you to continue walking before the entire road becomes visible. This uncertainty frustrates the intellect because it prefers control. Yet, transformation has never been controlled. It unfolds like the seasons. Winter does not ask permission before becoming spring. The seed does not debate whether it should grow. It simply responds to forces that are already at work beneath the surface. You are not separate from this process. You too possess an inner intelligence that recognizes change before your conscious awareness catches up. Have you wondered why some dreams feel unusually vivid, or why certain ideas suddenly carry emotional weight they never held before? These are not interruptions. They are invitations. The deeper mind repeats what the conscious mind refuses to hear. It is patient, but it is persistent. It understands that real change cannot be forced. It must be recognized. And perhaps that explains why you are here now, listening to these words. Something inside you recognized them before your logical mind decided they mattered. There is a part of you that has been searching not necessarily for answers, but for confirmation that what you feel is real. Let me offer you that confirmation. You are not imagining this quiet shift. You are sensing the earliest movement of a life that has already begun changing beneath the surface. The greatest transformations always begin in silence, long before the world can see them. Once you begin to recognize that quiet shift within yourself, another experience often follows, and it can be even more unsettling. The life that once felt familiar begins to feel strangely distant. Nothing may have changed on the outside. You may still wake up in the same home, speak with the same people, and follow the same routines. Yet, everything feels different because you are no longer seeing it through the same eyes. This is one of the most misunderstood moments in personal transformation. People assume something has gone wrong because what once brought comfort no longer brings peace. In reality, this discomfort often appears because your inner world has already begun expanding beyond the limits of your old identity. There is a quiet sadness that comes with outgrowing a version of yourself. It is not the sadness of failure. It is the sadness of realizing that a chapter which once defined your life can no longer define your future. We often become attached not only to people and places, but also to the identities we have carefully built. We learn to introduce ourselves through our achievements, our routines, our struggles, and even our disappointments. Over time, these identities become so familiar that we mistake them for who we truly are. But the human spirit was never meant to remain fixed. It is meant to evolve. Every meaningful stage of life asks you to release something that once felt essential. This is why growth can feel like loss before it feels like freedom. You are not only leaving behind old habits, you are saying goodbye to an entire way of seeing yourself. That is not easy. Even when the old identity no longer serves you, it still feels safe because it is familiar. The mind naturally clings to familiarity. It would rather remain in a predictable discomfort than step into an unfamiliar possibility. That is why many people spend years trying to force themselves back into lives they have already outgrown. They return to conversations that no longer inspire them. They chase goals that no longer belong to them. They continue wearing emotional masks that once protected them, but now prevent them from breathing freely. Have you noticed how exhausting it clear's throat has become to pretend? Perhaps you smile when your heart feels distant. Perhaps you continue saying yes to expectations that no longer reflect your deepest values. Perhaps you keep trying to become the person everyone expects while quietly feeling disconnected from yourself. This exhaustion is not a weakness. It is evidence that your authentic nature is asking for more space than your current life allows. Many people misunderstand this stage because they expect growth to feel exciting from the beginning. Instead, it often feels confusing. You lose certainty before you gain clarity. You lose comfort before you discover peace. You lose the old map before the new path becomes visible. This creates the illusion that you are lost when in truth you are simply standing between two identities. Think of a tree in early spring. From a distance, it may still appear lifeless, yet deep within countless invisible changes are already taking place. The roots are active before the branches bloom. Life is preparing itself long before the world can recognize it. Human transformation follows the same rhythm. Your deepest growth happens beneath the surface where no applause can reach and no one else can fully understand what is unfolding. There may even be relationships that begin to shift, not because you have become unkind, but because your conversations are changing. You seek depth where you once accepted distraction. You seek honesty where you once accepted appearances. You become less interested in proving yourself and more interested in understanding yourself. Some people will celebrate this change. Others may resist it because your transformation quietly invites them to confront their own. Remember, not everyone is comfortable watching someone else become more authentic. Do not confuse loneliness with being on the wrong path. Sometimes the space between your old life and your new one feels empty because you are no longer meant to live as the person you once were. But you have not yet fully stepped into the person you are becoming. This in-between season can feel uncertain. Clears throat. Yet it carries extraordinary purpose. It teaches patience. It teaches self-trust. Most importantly, it teaches you that your worth has never depended on how well you fit into a life you have already outgrown. There is great wisdom in allowing yourself to release what no longer reflects your deepest nature. You do not dishonor your past by moving beyond it. You honor it by recognizing that it prepared you for this very moment. Every lesson, every success, every disappointment, and every unanswered question has quietly shaped the person who now stands ready for something greater. Do not fear the feeling that your old life has become too small. It is often the first unmistakable sign that your true life is beginning to make room for you. As you begin releasing the life that no longer fits you, another experience almost always emerges. And this is the point where many people turn back. It is not because they lack strength. It is because they misunderstand what they are feeling. They expect transformation to bring immediate confidence. Yet, what often arrives first is resistance. The closer you move toward becoming your authentic self, the louder the voice of fear becomes. This surprises many people, but it should not. Every old identity fights to survive before it disappears. The mind has one purpose above all else: to keep you safe. Unfortunately, it often confuses what is familiar with what is safe. It would rather keep you inside an ordinary life that you have already outgrown than risk the uncertainty that accompanies genuine change. This is why, just as new opportunities begin to appear, you suddenly question yourself more than ever. You wonder if you are capable. You replay old failures. You imagine everything that could go wrong. You begin negotiating with yourself, convincing yourself that perhaps this is not the right time after all. But notice the pattern. Fear rarely becomes loud when you are standing still. It becomes loud when you are standing at the edge of something meaningful. Have you ever noticed that before making an important decision, your mind suddenly becomes filled with every possible reason to stay where you are? Before speaking your truth, you think of all the ways people may reject you. Before pursuing a dream, you remember every previous disappointment. Before trusting yourself, old memories return with surprising intensity. This is not evidence that you are making the wrong choice. It is evidence that the old patterns are struggling to maintain their influence within every human being lives. A hidden world that most people spend their lives avoiding. It contains forgotten fears, buried disappointments, unresolved emotions, and beliefs formed during moments of pain. These hidden parts do not disappear simply because you ignore them. They remain beneath the surface, quietly shaping your choices until you become willing to face them. And when real transformation approaches, these hidden forces often rise into awareness with unexpected strength. Many people interpret this as regression. They say, "I thought I was doing better. Why am I suddenly feeling anxious again? Why are these old memories returning? Why do I feel uncertain after making so much progress? They assume they are moving backward, yet what they are actually experiencing is something entirely different. What was once hidden is finally becoming visible. You cannot heal what remains unseen. The deeper mind brings these hidden fears into the light because they can no longer accompany you into the next chapter of your life. This is why moments of emotional discomfort should not always be feared. Sometimes discomfort is not the presence of danger. Sometimes it is the presence of truth. You are finally seeing the beliefs that have quietly governed your life for years. Perhaps you have carried the belief that you are not enough. Perhaps you have believed that success belongs to other people. Perhaps you have learned to seek acceptance by abandoning your own voice. These beliefs may have protected you once, but they were never meant to become permanent. Transformation demands honesty before it offers freedom. Ask yourself a simple question. When fear speaks, whose voice does it truly resemble? Is it your own, or does it echo the criticism you once received? Does it sound like someone who doubted you years ago? Does it repeat words that were spoken when you were too young to question them? Many of the fears we call our own are inherited from experiences we never consciously examined. We carry them for years, believing they describe reality, when in fact they describe old wounds. The remarkable thing is that once these fears become visible, they begin losing their power. They thrive in darkness, but they weaken in awareness. You no longer have to obey every fearful thought simply because it appears. You can acknowledge it without allowing it to decide your future. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the quiet decision that your deepest values matter more than your oldest fears. Do not wait for fear to disappear before you move forward. If you make that your condition, you may remain where you are for the rest of your life. Instead, learn to walk with uncertainty. Every meaningful transformation requires it. Every person who has ever discovered a more authentic life has walked through moments where certainty was unavailable, but purpose remained alive. One day you will look back and realize that the battle was never between you and the world. It was between the person you had been taught to become and the person you were always meant to be. The conflict was never a sign that you were failing. It was the evidence that two identities could no longer occupy the same life. When fear grows louder, do not mistake it for a command to retreat. It is often the final echo of the life you are leaving behind. After you have faced the resistance within yourself instead of running from it, something remarkable begins to happen. The battle inside slowly loses its intensity, and a different kind of awareness begins to emerge. It is subtle at first, so subtle that many people overlook it. They continue waiting for a dramatic event to prove that their lives are changing while missing the quiet evidence that transformation has already begun. The greatest changes rarely arrive like thunder. More often they arrive like the first light before sunrise, gentle enough to be ignored yet powerful enough to change everything. The outer world has not suddenly become different. What has changed is the one who is observing it. And this is where the deepest transformation begins. You stop reacting to life in the same automatic way. Situations that once disturbed your peace no longer have the same control over you. Conversations that once pulled you into unnecessary conflict begin to lose their grip. You notice yourself pausing before responding. You begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you quietly begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single shift in perception changes more than you can imagine. Most people believe reality changes first, and then they change afterward. But experience often reveals the opposite. When your inner world changes, your relationship with reality changes. You begin noticing opportunities that were always present, but hidden beneath old assumptions. You recognize possibilities that fear once prevented you from seeing. It is not because the world has suddenly become generous. It is because your perception has become clear. Have you ever bought something new and afterward you suddenly began seeing it everywhere? The object was always around you, but your awareness had not been tuned to notice it. Life works in much the same way. When your inner attention shifts, your outer experience begins revealing what was previously invisible. The opportunities were not created overnight. They simply entered your awareness because you became capable of recognizing them. This is also why certain encounters begin to feel strangely meaningful. You meet someone who speaks words you desperately needed to hear. A book appears at exactly the right moment. An unexpected conversation answers a question you have been carrying silently for weeks. A dream leaves you thinking long after you wake. Certain patterns begin repeating until you can no longer dismiss them as meaningless. Whether you call these moments coincidence or something deeper is less important than the effect they have upon you. They awaken your attention. They remind you that life often communicates through patterns before it speaks through certainty. Do not become obsessed with chasing extraordinary signs. The deepest guidance rarely shouts. It whispers through ordinary moments that carry extraordinary meaning. A brief silence may teach you more than endless noise. A single sentence may remain with you for years. A quiet realization while walking alone may alter the direction of your entire future. These moments are valuable because they arise naturally, without force. They invite reflection rather than demand belief. You may also notice your dreams becoming more vivid or emotionally significant. Dreams are not always predictions of the future, but they often reveal truths about the present that the conscious mind has overlooked. They bring hidden emotions into symbolic form. They present fears, hopes, unresolved conflicts, and forgotten possibilities in ways that bypass ordinary logic instead of dismissing them. Immediately ask yourself what they might be trying to reveal about your current state of mind. Sometimes the answers you seek during the day quietly visit you while you sleep. At the same time, your priorities begin changing without deliberate effort. Success no longer means simply accumulating more. You begin valuing peace over constant approval. Authenticity becomes more attractive than perfection. You become less interested in winning every argument and more interested in understanding yourself. This inner reordering is one of the clearest signs that your life is already changing. The transformation is not measured by what you possess, but by the person you are becoming. People around you may even notice the difference before you fully recognize it yourself. They may say you seem calmer, more grounded, or more thoughtful. Some may admire the change while others may feel uncomfortable because your quiet confidence reminds them of the changes they have postponed within themselves. Do not allow either praise or criticism to determine your direction. Your task is not to become who others expect. Your task is to remain faithful to the truth that has begun awakening within you. Remember that every visible result begins as an invisible decision. Every new chapter begins as a silent shift in perspective. Every lasting transformation begins long before circumstances catch up. Be patient with the process. The roots always deepen before the branches reach toward the sky. The unseen work is never wasted. It is preparing the visible life that will eventually grow from it. Trust the quiet changes within you, for they are already reshaping the world you have yet to see. Once you begin to recognize that your inner world is quietly reshaping the way you experience life, there is one final obstacle that often keeps people from fully stepping into their transformation. It is the habit of waiting. Waiting for certainty. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for permission. Waiting for the perfect moment when fear disappears and every answer becomes clear. Yet if you study the most meaningful turning points in life, you will notice something extraordinary. They were never entered because every doubt had vanished. They were entered because, despite uncertainty, a decision was made. Many people spend years believing that confidence must come before action. They tell themselves, "When I finally believe in myself, then I will begin. When I feel ready, then I will change. When life becomes easier, then I will pursue what truly matters." But readiness is rarely a condition that arrives on its own. More often, it is something that grows because you choose to move before you feel completely prepared. Consider how a child learns to walk. They do not wait until they are certain they will never fall. They stand, stumble, fall, rise again, and slowly discover balance through movement itself. Imagine if they believed they needed perfect confidence before taking their first step. They would remain on the ground forever. The same principle follows you throughout life. Growth has always rewarded movement, not hesitation. There is already a version of yourself quietly waiting beneath the identity you have carried for so long. That wiser, calmer, more authentic version is not someone you must create from nothing. It is someone you gradually uncover by making choices that reflect your deepest values instead of your oldest fears. Every time you choose honesty over pretending, you strengthen that emerging self. Every time you choose courage over comfort, you give that hidden identity more room to breathe. Every time you refuse to let fear make another decision on your behalf, you become a little more familiar with the person you were always capable of becoming. The mistake many people make is believing that one dramatic moment will transform everything. They imagine waking up one morning completely different, filled with endless motivation and absolute certainty. But real transformation is rarely dramatic. It is built through ordinary decisions repeated with extraordinary consistency. It is choosing to speak when silence has become a prison. It is choosing to forgive when resentment feels easier. It is choosing discipline when excuses offer temporary relief. These quiet decisions appear insignificant in isolation, yet together they reshape an entire life. Ask yourself honestly, how many dreams have remained untouched because you were waiting for permission that no one else was ever meant to give? How many opportunities have passed because you believed someone else needed to approve the life you wished to live from childhood? Many people become conditioned to seek approval before taking action. They wait for someone to tell them they are talented enough, intelligent enough, experienced enough, or worthy enough. Yet no external voice can permanently silence the doubts that originate within. At some point, you must become the one who grants yourself permission to move forward. This does not mean pretending fear no longer exists. Fear may continue walking beside you for some time, but it no longer deserves the privilege of leading you. There is a profound difference between listening to fear and obeying it. Fear can offer information without becoming your master. It can remind you to prepare carefully without convincing you to abandon your purpose altogether. As you continue changing, there will be moments when the old identity tries to return. Familiar habits may call your name. Old patterns may promise temporary comfort. There may even be days when you question whether you have truly changed at all. Do not allow temporary setbacks to erase permanent progress. A single storm does not undo the arrival of spring. A difficult day does not erase months of quiet growth. Transformation is not measured by perfection. It is measured by your willingness to keep choosing the person you are becoming instead of the person you have already outgrown. Look closely at your daily life. Every small decision is quietly casting a vote for your future identity. The words you speak to yourself matter. The thoughts you repeatedly entertain matter. The boundaries you establish matter. The habits you nurture matter. They may appear ordinary today, but over time, they become the architecture of an entirely different life. Do not underestimate the power of a single decision made with genuine conviction. History is filled with lives that changed because someone finally stopped asking whether they were ready and instead asked whether they were willing to learn, willing to fail, willing to grow, willing to become unfamiliar with the old self so that a more authentic one could finally emerge. The life you have been waiting for begins the moment you stop waiting for permission to become the person you already know you can be. As we arrive at the end of this journey together, I want you to pause for a moment and look back not only at the words you have heard, but at the quiet movements that have already begun within you. Perhaps nothing dramatic has happened during these moments. Perhaps your circumstances remain exactly as they were when you first began listening. Yet, if you have listened carefully, something far more important may have shifted. You may no longer be looking at your life through the same eyes. That is how true transformation begins. It does not always begin with a new opportunity, a sudden breakthrough, or an extraordinary event that everyone can see. More often, it begins with a different way of understanding yourself. It begins when you stop treating your discomfort as an enemy and start recognizing it as a messenger. It begins when you stop asking why life feels uncertain and begin asking what this uncertainty is preparing you to become. Years from now, there may be a day when you sit quietly remembering this season of your life. You will remember the confusion that once kept you awake at night. You will remember the questions that seemed impossible to answer. You will remember wondering whether you were falling apart or finally becoming whole. And with the wisdom that only time can provide, you will smile because you will recognize something you cannot fully recognize today. You were never falling apart. You were being rearranged from within. At the time, it felt uncomfortable because every meaningful transformation asks you to release certainty before offering clarity. It asks you to trust before you possess evidence. It asks you to keep walking while much of the road remains hidden from view. The mind calls this uncertainty. Life calls it preparation. Think about every meaningful chapter that has ever shaped your life. Before it arrived, there was almost always a period when nothing seemed to make sense. Doors closed without explanation. Plans changed unexpectedly. Relationships shifted. Dreams were delayed. You believed life was taking something away from you, only to discover later that it was quietly making room for something far greater than you could have imagined. The remarkable thing about human perception is that it often understands the meaning of an experience only after it has already passed. While you are inside the storm, you see only confusion. Clear's throat. Once you emerge from it, you begin seeing purpose. What once appeared to be an obstacle becomes the very event that redirected your life toward its deepest possibilities. This is why you must not judge your life by your present level of understanding. You are standing inside a chapter that has not yet revealed its ending. Be patient enough to let the story unfold before deciding what it means. There will still be moments when doubt returns. There will still be mornings when old fears attempt to convince you that nothing has changed. There will still be days when progress feels invisible. Do not allow those moments to deceive you. A tree does not stop growing simply because you cannot measure its growth from one day to the next. Rivers continue carving mountains without announcing each movement. The deepest transformations are often too gradual to notice while they are happening. Continue trusting the quiet work taking place within you. Continue choosing truth over comfort, courage over certainty, and authenticity over approval. Each choice strengthens the foundation of the life you are building. The future is not created by one extraordinary moment. It is created by thousands of ordinary moments in which you refuse to abandon the person you are becoming. One day, someone may ask you how your life changed. They may expect you to point to a single event, a single opportunity, or a single decision. But you will know the answer is much deeper than that. You will remember that your life truly began changing long before anyone else noticed. It began in silence. It began when your heart sensed what your mind could not yet explain. It began when you stopped resisting the quiet voice within and finally allowed it to guide you toward a life that reflected who you truly are. Never forget that every new beginning is invisible before it becomes undeniable. Every meaningful future is first born inside the unseen world of thought, character, and awareness. Long before circumstances transform, the individual transforms. And once that inner transformation becomes genuine, the outer world cannot remain the same forever. So if even now there is a quiet feeling inside you that life is about to change, do not dismiss it, simply because you cannot explain it. Some of the most important truths in life arrive as quiet certainties long before they become visible realities. Trust that feeling. Protect it. Nurture it with your actions. Allow it to become stronger than your doubts, stronger than your fears, and stronger than the habits that once kept you standing still. Because one day you will look back on this moment and realize that this was never the end of an ordinary chapter. It was the quiet beginning of the life you were always meant to.